In this comparative study, I will analyze the similarities and differences in the environmentalist messaging of two different animated films. WALL-E, a 2008 American animated science fiction film directed by Andrew Stanton and produced by Pixar Animation Studios, and Princess Mononoke, a 1997 Japanese animated epic historical fantasy film directed by Hayao Miyazaki and animated by Studio Ghibli. While each film comes from an environmentalist perspective, WALL-E is more anthropocentric than Princess Mononoke, which tends towards more ecocentric theory. In the Journal of Environmental Psychology, Catherine Kortenkamp and Colleen Moore state, "In an anthropocentric ethic, nature deserves moral consideration because how nature is treated affects humans. In an ecocentric ethic, nature deserves moral consideration because nature has intrinsic value." In other words, while both films advocate for environmental protection, WALL-E is primarily concerned with the human effects and costs on and of environmental degradation, while Princess Mononoke places an equal emphasis on human and ecological effects, stressing the importance of a holistic view of environmental issues. A key contributor to each film's presentation of their environmentalist ideas is their individual contexts. Princess Mononoke is set in Japan during the late Muromachi period, approximately 1336 to 1573 AD, and follows Ashitaka, a young Emishi prince who becomes cursed by a boar demon while defending his village. The Muromachi era was marked by the rise of industry and commerce, often at the expense of traditional rural life and nature. The protagonist Ashitaka's role as a peacemaker reflects the film's deeper philosophical roots in Shinto beliefs. Shinto, an indigenous Japanese spiritual tradition, emphasizes harmony between humans and nature, where the relationship between the natural environment of this world and people is that of bloodkin, like the bond between brother and sister. Drawing on its historical context of Muromachi period Japan and Shinto beliefs, Princess Mononoke presents a nuanced environmentalist narrative about resolving conflict through understanding and the consequences of disrupting that balance. WALL-E sits on the opposite end of the spectrum. In the distant dystopian future of 2805, WALL-E is set in a world where corporate irresponsibility and unchecked consumerism have resulted in a rotted, uninhabitable Earth. Unlike in Princess Mononoke, the damage has already been done here. WALL-E's presentation of the world reflects anxieties prevalent in the West in the early 21st century surrounding issues of corporate irresponsibility and consumerism, and the disastrous effects that may result from those issues, such as climate change and social degradation, providing the foundation for WALL-E's environmental conflict. The film's corporate overlord by and large satirizes real-world overreaching profit-hungry corporate monoliths such as Amazon, Walmart, Google, or, ironically, Disney. The corporation's dominance and excess symbolize the dangers of unregulated consumer capitalism, echoing the warnings against unsustainable growth given by the environmentalist movements of the early 21st century. BNL and the system it perpetuated serve as the true environmental antagonist of the film's narrative, as opposed to a single individual. In the beginning of the film, the viewer is presented with these sweeping establishing shots showing the extent to which every consuming aspect of life on Earth has been dominated by BNL. And when WALL-E arrives at the axiom, that imagery continues, only in a more lively manner. BNL has only progressed further in their consumer capitalist pursuits, pushing humanity into a vacuous way of life spanning centuries, entirely ruled by consumerism, leaving no trace of nature. This imagery presents a very on-the-nose criticism of the unsustainable nature of capitalism, where relentless exploitation of finite resources ultimately leads to environmental collapse. Even Otto, the main tangible force acting to maintain BNL's system of consumer capitalism, is simply a product of that self-reinforcing system.
Must follow my directive.
Importantly, WALL-E does not place the blame for this dystopia on individual consumers. Instead, it presents a critique of the all-encompassing societal and economic system that has stripped humanity of its agency, reducing people to passive consumers whose lives are dictated by BNL's unrelenting pursuit of profit. The company's own slogan says it all.
By and large, everything you need to be happy.
Because the film's environmental conflict centers around BNL's consumer capitalist system and not the actual tangible point of interaction between humanity and nature, WALL-E's environmentalist critique is secondary to and consequential of its anti-consumer capitalist critique. This strategy demonstrates the anthropocentric nature of WALL-E's environmentalism, as the need for environmental protection, the value of that protection, stems from the adverse effect on humans brought by the destruction of nature. Princess Mononoke's antagonist demonstrates a very different reasoning to support environmental protection. Unlike in WALL-E, the film places its environmental conflict at the forefront of the interaction between humanity and nature, where human ambition meets environment. The antagonist is Lady Eboshi, an industrialist who destroys nature for its resources in order to advance human interests. In the film's plot, Eboshi represents industrialization, but when viewed in the context of the film's environmentalist narrative and messaging, she also serves as a representation of anthropocentric ideology. Princess Mononoke uses this character to critique that ideology. In keeping with the film's holistic attitude, Eboshi's character is not that of a wholly evil villain. While she does subjugate nature, she does so because she views it as the best way to protect humans and give them the best possible quality of life. Under her rule, everyone has an important role in society and is treated fairly. This portrayal complicates her character, but it does not absolve her of the harm she causes. Even when faced with the consequences of her actions, she refuses to change her perspective. Her willingness to justify destruction for progress makes her an embodiment of the anthropocentric ideology that the film critiques. By harming the natural world to secure Irontown's survival, Eboshi provokes retaliation from nature, perpetuating conflict rather than resolving it. Her destructive actions eventually come to a head when she decapitates the spirit of the forest, ignoring the warnings of Ashitaka. The death of the spirit brings the razing of the entire world around her, including Irontown, which she had been working so hard to protect. This ironic consequence of her anthropocentric convictions shows the film's reasoning for environmental protection, that total anthropocentrism is not a sustainable ideology, and an alternative approach to progress that accounts for nature's intrinsic value is necessary in order for that progress to be made sustainably. That is, an ecocentric approach. And perhaps the best example of Princess Mononoke's ecocentric ideal is the film's deuteragonist. San, the deuteragonist, is intrinsically connected with nature. San, also known as Princess Mononoke, is the antithesis to Lady Eboshi. She represents the natural world and the inherent connection between humanity and nature, and serves as a symbol for environmental activism. She would do anything to protect the natural world, a fact demonstrated by her putting her life on the line in its defense constantly throughout every stage of the film. San herself is not only a guardian and punisher on behalf of nature, but also a part of it. She rejects her humanity, having been raised by Moro, the wolf god. San does not just reject her own humanity, but humans as a whole, fighting against them savagely and without consideration of nuance. And her actions are justified, as demonstrated by the dramatic and dark shots of the destruction brought upon the forest by Eboshi as they subjugate the wild animals and seize the forest's natural resources in order to continue funding and fueling their conquest. This is what San sees in the humans. If she and the rest of the animals don't fight back, it will mean the end for their world. By presenting the viewer with a deeply nuanced and complex personification of nature's perspective and placing it in a position of both incredible importance and strength in the film's narrative, Princess Mononoke illustrates the intrinsic value within nature that is outside of its connection to human objectifications of worth, thereby exemplifying the ecocentric nature of the film's environmentalist narrative. Conversely, WALL-E places very little power in its presentation of nature. In WALL-E, all of nature has been reduced down to a single plant in a boot. Unlike in Princess Mononoke, nature itself, represented by the plant, is entirely impotent and at the mercy of humanity's decisions. The plant is treated as a simple MacGuffin, the object that the protagonists of the film need to deliver in order to return to Earth. But in the context of WALL-E's environmentalist messaging, WALL-E is not the protagonist. Humanity is. This is most obvious in the character of the captain, the highest position on the axiom where humanity's collective power is concentrated. After meeting WALL-E and Eve, the captain learns about all the things that humans used to do upon Earth when they still had a connection to the natural world. It is this realization of a better time outside of BNL's oppressive system that drives the captain to challenge Otto and wrest control of the axiom from it at the climax of the film's narrative, once Eve and WALL-E present him with the plant as evidence of the Earth's potential for rebirth. Instead of nature itself being a force that plays a role in the conflict to return to Earth, it ends up being humanity that, in the pursuit of its own goal, restores the natural world. The entire environmentalist issue stems from a human perspective. Disconnection from nature due to irresponsible consumer capitalism causes humanity to fall into atrophy. The captain reclaiming his humanity is what allows him to defy Otto and BNL's directive and deliver humanity from its consumer capitalist dystopia to a natural world, because that's what would serve humanity the best. Nature is not given a hand in its own fate. This subordination of nature to humanity's interests displays the anthropocentric nature of WALL-E's environmentalism, as humanity's will and the human effects of natural restoration are what drive the environmentalism, as opposed to nature's intrinsic value. Princess Mononoke and WALL-E both emphasize the urgency of environmental protection, though through different lenses. WALL-E, coming from an anthropocentric perspective, critiques consumer capitalism and humanity's disconnection from nature, reflecting Western anxieties about overconsumption and corporate dominance. In contrast, Princess Mononoke, coming from an ecocentric perspective and rooted in Shinto philosophy and historical industrialization, highlights the intrinsic value of nature and the need for coexistence. The juxtaposition of the film's contexts and ideologies speaks to the universality of the issue of environmentalism. No matter what perspective it is seen from, anthropocentric or ecocentric, rampant exploitation of natural resources, be they physical or intellectual, results in putrefaction. In the real world, there is no magic deity that will heal the world after it's been ravaged, nor will the Walt Disney Company build starliners to rescue everyone when humanity's consumerist capitalist habits devastate the habitability of Earth. WALL-E and Princess Mononoke are two films that, despite their contrasting contexts and approaches, both converge on the same fundamental idea. We must protect the environment, be it for its sake or our own.